So, how do we navigate the non physical? Well, let's relate it to the physical. So, how do we get around in the physical? Well, it's pretty straightforward. We move, right? To get from where I am out to get more coffee, you get up and you move, right? So, how do we navigate the non physical? Well, there's two primary ways. And there's really two primary ways that we interact with our non physical. And knowing those gives us the tools and understanding to navigate in and with and through them. So, in your non physical, and it really even applies to the physical as well, there's really only two ways we interact with things. There's everything that we notice, and there's the one thing that we choose to focus on. So, right now, I'm going to relate this. Let's start with the physical. So you're watching and listening to this wherever you're watching and listening to it from. And if you stopped and just sort of were aware of what you noticed, you will probably notice other sounds in the room. You may notice certain aromas or smells in the room. You may notice certain sensations in your body, what you're sitting on, right? Are you comfortable, uncomfortable? Temperature, is it warm in the room? Is it cool in the room? And what's really interesting is when you shift your focus to what you notice, you start to notice more. Okay, I'm going to say that again. When you shift your focus to what you notice more, and what you notice gets bigger. Have you ever had this happen? I know I have. You're in a restaurant. And when you're in a restaurant, remember when you can go to restaurants and they were full of people? So you're in a restaurant and there's people talking and laughing and, enjoying things themselves. And you pick up a phrase, right? You notice a phrase from a conversation. And then just for a moment, you focus on that. And then you can't not hear it. You ever notice that? It's like, I noticed it. I focused on it for a moment. And now I'm hearing it. So this is what's really interesting is there are all these things that we notice. So what we notice finds us. What we focus on, we go and find. We choose. You choose to focus on this video. You chose to focus on that phrase that person was saying. You chose to focus on, maybe you were as you kind of were aware of what you noticed, maybe you go, gee, this chair is kind of uncomfortable. Now you focused on it and you go, boy, I never noticed how uncomfortable it really is. Now it's always been the same sensations, but what has happened? You focused on it. So this is one of the fundamentals, and it applies to the physical and the non-physical, is whatever you focus on gets bigger. And whatever you don't gets smaller. Now, this is one of the fundamental truths about navigating not just your non-physical, but your physical as well. And this is also why we talk about in our fundamentals that it's always about introducing what we do want, not eliminating what we don't want. So the person comes in to see you, and what do they tend to be? They're focused on something or things they don't want. Now, the more you focus on it, the bigger it gets. It doesn't matter, I like to say, whether you love it or whether you hate it. If you're focusing on it, it's going to get bigger. This is one of the reasons why. I'm not saying we're not aware, right? We notice things. I'm not saying we're not aware of that. We're not aware of the problem or problems. We're not aware of the root cause or causes. But where our focus is always on introducing what we do want. And then we want to hover, orbit around that. Why? Because whatever you focus on gets bigger. And if you're focusing on that, you're not focusing on what you don't want. So it's going to get smaller. So now let's apply that to the non-physical. In your non-physical, remember, it's made up of pictures or movies, voices or dialogue. That's the whole thing. There are going to be things that you notice, and then there's going to be the things that you choose to focus on. So just as I related it in the physical, the same thing happens in the non-physical. So you may notice certain thoughts floating through your mind. There may be certain memories that float through your mind. May be certain sort of projections into the future that just kind of float through your mind. You notice them. And remember, we really have very little control over what we notice. Okay, this is really important. When we're navigating our non-physical, just like the physical, but when we're navigating our non-physical, we have very little control over what we notice. So those thoughts that float through your mind that don't feel good, the memories that don't feel good, the projections into the future that don't feel good, do not try and force them away. This is one of the areas we trip ourselves up so much, because in order to try and force them away, you've got to focus on them, right? In order to push something away, you need to focus on it. And what do we know about whatever you focus on? It gets bigger. So the way that you navigate your non-physical is entirely through whatever you choose to focus on. So if in a period of time, and remember, it's not so much what you're aware or what you notice, it's what you focus on. So you can have thoughts and memories and projections into the future. And remember, mechanically, they're all the same thing, right? I mean, they're made up of pictures or movies, voices or dialogues. You can have them floating through your awareness all day long. What I want you to practice being aware of is what are the one or ones that you choose to focus on. Because the one or ones you choose to focus on are the ones that are going to play a bigger role in the flavoring of your present moment experience. And this is huge when you understand this, because so often we get so hung up on everything that we notice. Oh, I noticed that thought. I noticed that thought. I noticed that memory. I noticed that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then of course, when we're doing that, what happens? We're focusing on them, right? So don't get too uptight about that. What I do want you to do is practice being aware of the ones or ones that you focus on, and then practice being aware of the ones that you focus on, and then you give form by talking about them. Now, I'm not saying that we never are allowed to say if you will, a negative or something like that. But what is the flavoring of your physical speech? Because the physical, when we're speaking, is vibration, right? And we're giving it physical form by talking about it. Another way to think of it is, what's the perspective we're talking about it from? So if there's a problem and you're focusing on the problem and talking about the problem and sharing your problem with other people and sharing your problem with other people who have the same problem, going to support groups with other people who have the same problem, and you're sitting there talking about the problem and how big it is and how difficult it is and how this other person wasn't able to overcome it and all this kind of stuff, what are you doing? You're making it bigger and bigger and bigger. Or could you say, okay, this is the problem, and then you realize you're focusing on it, so we're not just pretending it's not there, but then as quickly as you can, move the conversation to what you want to see instead of that. So now you're moving your focus from what you don't want to what you do want. And again, the principle still applies. Whatever you focus on gets bigger. So if you're focusing on, yes, I've got this problem, but this is what I want and this is what I'm looking for, and it's going to be so amazing when it gets here. And let's see, what could I do to help bring that in quicker? Right? See, so now you're moving from what you don't want to what you do. Perfect. All right. Thanks for tuning into the module. We'll see you in the next one.